Welcome to Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Ship, and I'm excited to be sharing with you my life with a son on the spectrum. This podcast is for anyone who is looking for quick tips and perspective, but most of all, for hope and inspiration. So sit back, relax, and let's put the pieces together. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Ship. Thank you so much for joining us today. Last episode, we had the great pleasure of speaking with Ms. Melissa Reiner. If you did not get a chance to check out that episode, please do. We had a wonderful conversation. Actually did a two-part series with her. And thanks again, Melissa, for being on the show. I appreciated everything that we talked about on that episode. Today, we're talking about a topic that affects so many families, the struggle with reading. If you've ever heard your child say, "I hate reading," then you know how heartbreaking it can be. But what if you could turn that around? Our guest today is doing just that. Daniela is a former attorney in her 50s, reinvented herself by earning a master's degree in special education. She's the founder of Kids Up Reading Tutors, where she leads a team of reading revolutionaries dedicated to helping students overcome significant reading challenges. Using scientifically proven, evidence-based methods, Daniela and her team specialize in the dramatic transformation of students with dyslexia and dysgraphia. They take kids who feel defeated by books and turn them into confident, capable readers who actually start to love it again. Daniela is here to demystify conditions like dyslexia, share the warning signs parents can look for, and explain how the science of reading is unlocking literacy for students who were once left behind. Please join me in welcoming the founder of Kids Up Reading Tutors, Daniela. Thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be talking to you.
I was so excited to have you on the show because I know when we talked on our discovery call, I was telling you about how this is very close to my heart because Drayson was diagnosed actually with all three of the Ds, right? Dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. So I knew immediately when you and I spoke that I wanted to have you on the show to help give perspective to parents. So I'm really excited to be speaking with you about this today for sure. I know your journey began as an attorney from 25 years ago, so it's funny, to special education expert. So your journey seems so inspiring to me, and that was something else that we spoke about. What was the moment or motivation that made you decide to make such a significant switch? Because that's pretty drastic.
It is pretty drastic, but it was actually years, if not decades, in the making.
Okay.
I started volunteering at local elementary schools when my oldest son was maybe 4 years old. And really, I was just trying to check out the local elementary school. And the way I did it was that I joined the local neighborhood volunteer group. It was just a group of folks who came in once a week to listen to kids read to them. And so I started doing that about 25 years ago, and I just loved it. And I kept doing more and more of that in different schools and different contexts over the years, but without actually being trained to teach kids to read. And then one day I decided, you know what? I want to do this for real. I want to actually teach these kids to read. I can see how much they're struggling. Yes, it's great to listen to them, but I actually want to teach them how to become better readers.
Right.
And fortunately, I had a friend who, I was talking to her and she's like, I know exactly what you should do. And she helped me get into a class that was intended for classroom teachers, which I was not at the time, but they let me into the class. It was a class on teaching reading effectively, I think is what it was called. It was a week-long course. And by the end of the week, I was like, this is what I want to do. This is awesome.
Right.
And so I went and got a master's degree in special education, and I did a whole bunch of training in teaching dyslexic kids to read, and then ultimately founded this tutoring company, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
And the rest is history, huh?
The rest is history, as they say. Exactly right. Exactly.
That's amazing. Right. Well, and I know one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was, just starting with the basics for parents who might be worried, right? What exactly, and maybe for our listeners today, what exactly is dyslexia and how is it different from dysgraphia? Because I know when I tell people that Drayson has all three, a lot of people are not familiar with dysgraphia or dyscalculia. dyslexia is always the common one, right? So what exactly is dyslexia and how is it different from dysgraphia?
Yeah, so dyslexia is really about reading,
Okay.
whereas dysgraphia is about writing.
Okay.
So dyslexia, and both of them have various causes, various, I'm going to say, aspects that kids need to work on to improve their skills.
Right.
But the range is actually much broader with dysgraphia. So with dyslexia, it really is about the reading.
The reading
And
portion, yeah.
about getting the words off the page and making meaning of those words, sort of ultimately comprehending what it is that you're reading. With dysgraphia, it's about writing, but it can mean different things to different people. So, or different things in different circumstances. So for some kids, dysgraphia might have to do with the fact that they're having a very hard time with the fine motor skills of actually writing. Like they have a
Okay.
poor pencil grip, for example, and they're having trouble actually getting the letters onto the piece of paper. So
Okay.
that would be one type of dysgraphia. Another type of dysgraphia would be if you've got all these brilliant thoughts, but you can't quite organize them in a way that makes sense to someone else. That could be a type of dysgraphia. Another type of dysgraphia, and this is the kind that we work on, is kids who are having trouble with writing because they're having an underlying problem with spelling.
Right.
And if you're spending all kinds of time and mental energy trying to figure out how to spell individual words, well,
Right.
then there's not much time or mental energy left to worry about, talking about all those wonderful things, all those great thoughts that are going through your mind. If you're having trouble spelling words, you're just going to come up with the shortest words in the shortest sentences with the fewest number of sentences possible to get through
Right.
that prompt that your teacher is making you respond to.
Right.
So it tends to really, really limit how much kids are willing to write
Yeah.
because they're so worried about having to spell all those words.
Right. And
So
can they
different.
have like an intermix of those categories too,
Oh,
those
absolutely.
subcategories that you're describing?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and that's
Okay.
one of the things that we see with kids who've got one learning challenge is that many times they often have another learning challenge or multiple other learning challenges as well.
Yeah.
But the connection between dyslexia and dysgraphia, the spelling version of dysgraphia, is that really they're two sides of the same coin, if you will. It's understanding how our reading and writing system work,
Okay.
and knowing all of those phonics patterns, for example. So if you don't know the phonics patterns, you're going
Right.
to have trouble reading words with those phonics patterns, but you're also going to have trouble spelling words with those phonics patterns.
I
So
see.
in many ways, dyslexia and dysgraphia, at least the spelling version of dysgraphia, are two sides of the same coin. They're basically the same thing. And as you are teaching children one side of that coin, it also
Helps
works
the
on the other
other.
side, it also helps the other. And in fact, the research is showing that if you focus a lot on the spelling, that will help kids learn to read. There are absolutely kids out there who can read well, but who
Yeah.
can't spell. But if you can spell something correctly, chances are you're going to be able to read it as well. So
Yeah.
spelling is a really good entry point, not just into spelling, but also into reading.
Right. Interesting. Wow,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. So I
And
know,
then,
and oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say
No.
dyscalculia is about math. So that's a
Yeah.
different
Just
world,
yeah.
but there is
Totally
but
different
there
world.
is absolutely overlap between all of these things. And for example, kids who are having trouble with reading and writing, it starts as a reading and writing problem, but then as they get older and progress through the grades in school, suddenly they may have a problem with math, even if they don't have an underlying problem with, math calculations or anything like that. If they understand conceptually the math perfectly well, they may still struggle when they get to word problems, for example.
Oh yeah, that's one of
Um,
Drayson's worst
yeah,
categories is the word
yeah,
problems. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, because that for him then is going to be the overlap of the problems with math and the problems with reading, and then when he has to respond to it all, there you have the problems with writing.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
and
word
that's
problems were
really
like
common. Yeah,
yeah,
that's really
word problems cause him a lot of frustration for that
Yep.
reason,
Yep.
So yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah. So what starts as a reading problem often morphs into a math problem and then a problem with, all of the other subjects the kids are taking in school,
Yeah.
even though really underlying fundamentally, it's often just a reading problem in quotes.
Yeah, I know. Well, and I feel like that translates into so many other things, like you were saying, into math, into, and even socially, like I feel like that translates across the board. If you're not helping somebody with the dyslexia, like Drayson was in dyslexia tutoring for a couple years. And we did that initially because there was a huge deficit with what we were seeing. We were like, and it just wasn't enough. So we put him in dyslexia tutoring, and all of a sudden I could see traction happening,
Yeah.
right? And so, and this was 2-3 years ago, and I've now thought about. And that was something that I was like, actually another question to you that I was going to have was, and sorry for my listeners, I'm being totally selfish and asking about my kid right now on the show. But I mean, I think he needs to step back into that tutoring, because I'm seeing now there's more advanced stuff that's happening, right, in his education, and I'm wondering if I should have kept up with it, is what I'm trying to say, because I feel like now we're going to have to do some more again, because he's not falling behind, but you can see the struggle. And so I'm wondering, have I given him enough tools and resources, or does he need more, basically,
I mean,
So
how is he doing with reading or decoding multisyllabic words? So what grade is he in? I'm sorry, I forgot.
he's in eighth. No, it's okay. He's in eighth grade, and he graduates. Yeah, he graduates from eighth grade, and then he starts high school next year. So I feel like we're kind of entering that critical turning point.
Yeah.
So
how does he do, what does he do when he's got a 3 or 4 syllable word in front of him?
He's fine. He reads well. He's
fine.
one of
He
those
reads
kids.
well.
He
Okay.
reads well, and that's how it kind of went under the radar with him when he was diagnosed with dyslexia. And I've said it before on my show to my listeners, like that was what the school would tell me when I'm like, I think he might have dyslexia because there's a comprehension issue here. Like there's something, like there was a disconnection, and they kept saying, oh no, he reads fine. And I'm like, no, but he's still not fully grasping, or he's getting confused when he goes to write stuff down. Now, he writes very well, and that's because we had him in occupational therapy very, very quickly. Like at age 4, he was already in occupational therapy. And
Great.
so he writes well too. So there's one of those. So again, they were like, no, there's no problems. And he loves to spell. He loves his words. He loves, spelling. So there was nothing showing up in the spelling either. It was the middle pillar that you were describing of like, he has these thoughts, but he just can't fully. So they were fragmented sentences, and still they're fragmented when he writes them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's where I was like, that's where I was thinking, I'm like, maybe I need to stay up on that. And I guess that's a good point to bring to my listeners today, is like, just because we did that treatment, or we did those tutorings, or we did those therapies, does not mean that I shouldn't be stepping back into it with him again.
Sure.
I just think it
different
requires
needs
a
arise.
revisit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
different needs arise over time. And, a lot of these kids are complicated.
Yeah.
And they've got, a few different things going on. And you can't solve all the problems at once.
Yeah.
So you have to,
I
you
know.
have to choose what's most important in that moment.
Yeah.
And then I think you work on that, and then you choose the next thing that is then most important.
Yeah.
And then you work on that. You can't be doing 5 different therapies, or I personally, with my kids, was never able to do 5 different therapies all at the same time.
Oh,
You
no.
gotta,
I mean,
you have to sequence.
It's funny. My ex-husband and I say the same thing about Drayson. He is one of the hardest working kids that we know. He just doesn't know how hard he's working because of the amount of therapies that he's in. I mean, he's got speech and OT and occupational therapy outside of school already. So when we put in dyslexia tutoring, I was really worried because I didn't want to overwhelm him. But it was funny because he came out of it and I was like, he's hungry for this. Like you could tell, like he was really, really embracing parts of that. And So I'm with you. Like, that's the thing. It's like he's already in so many therapies, and I think that's now I'm noticing, though, I'm like, maybe there's a revisit here for me, with this.
Okay.
Now, I know I saw some early warning signs of dyslexia, but what are some of the most common early warning signs that you see or of dyslexia and dysgraphia that parents maybe of young children should watch out for?
Sure. A lot of times, kids who are later diagnosed with dyslexia have trouble with what we call phonological processing.
Okay.
And that's really it's about how your brain is wired. And do you really, truly, deeply understand that words are made up of individual sounds? And if you put sounds together in different combinations, you get different words.
Right.
And if you're a good reader and a good speller, then you're probably saying, well, yeah, of course, words are sounds and sounds are words.
Right.
That's not obvious to everyone, and it's generally not obvious to the kids with dyslexia. And those are the kids who then, because they don't understand that, they're generally trying desperately to memorize words. So they're trying to memorize this word and this word and this word and this word, and they're often looking around at the other kids in the class going, wow,
Yeah.
everybody else has a much better memory than I do. There's something wrong with my memory because I can't memorize all these words. And
Right.
they're not understanding, no, you're not supposed to memorize. You can't possibly memorize the thousands of words that we have in the English language. Instead, you're supposed to understand this code and then use this code, the phonics code, and these other skills to what we call decode or sound out or read a word, and then encode or spell that word again. And if you don't understand that you're supposed to be decoding and encoding, then what you're left with is desperately trying to memorize lots and lots of words. And those are the kids, for example, they go to write the word, just as an example, they go to write the word saw, and they write was instead. And
Okay.
then, you have a conversation with them about, well, actually, and they look at you like, what do you want? I knew it was
Yeah.
3 letters. I knew what the 3 letters were, so I wrote them down in a different order. Who cares? Right? Like they literally don't understand that that order actually makes a huge difference.
Right.
So if you're seeing your child like sounding out or trying to read the same word over and over again, um, and they just it's like they've never seen the word before, even though they just read it, the same page or the same sentence or the previous page. If they're having trouble with the same word over and over and over and over again, that's generally a sign that there might be something more going on there. Usually what happens when kids understand how the system works and they sound a word out, bit by bit, so they look at the letter and they think about the sound, and then they look at the next letter and group of letters and think about the sound, and they string it all together and they know the meaning of the word, then something called orthographic mapping happens in their head. So if you can map the sounds to the letters to the meaning of the word, that word is I'm just gonna say, stick in your brain. And you can't even help yourself. You couldn't not read it if you wanted to, right?
Right.
Like you drive past a billboard, you're going to read the billboard. You can't stop yourself from reading it. So once that orthographic mapping has happened, it's there and the kids have got it and they don't have to sound it out anymore.
Okay.
And if your child is reading the same word 20, 30, 40, 50 times, and that's not happening, that's a sign that there might be something going on.
There might be something
Um,
going on.
yeah. Another sign would be if your child is having trouble with rhyming, for example.
Okay.
Because if you want to rhyme, you have to be able to pull that word apart.
Okay.
So let's say you want to rhyme with the word bat. In order to do that, right, like the rhyming words for bat are bat, sat, cat, hat, and so on, in order to be able to do that, you have to pull that b away from the at.
Yeah.
So you have to spread, we call that the onset and the rhyme.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to pull apart that initial sound, that onset, separate it from the rest of the word, and then swap out that onset. Because when you're going from bat to hat to cat to sat, you're leaving the at part. You're leaving what we call
Right.
the rhyme. You're swapping out that onset.
Yeah.
Lots of kids have trouble with that because they don't really even realize that bat has a first sound and then a second sound and then a third sound. They're
I see.
thinking of bat as just a word.
A
It's
word.
another one of those words that I have to memorize. They're not realizing that bat is actually b-at or b-act, depending on,
Right.
the size of the chunk you want to break it down to. Um, and that is a sign of this phonological issue, and that then ultimately, is part of the puzzle for kids who have trouble with reading and spelling.
Okay.
The good news is that there are exercises. We actually call them word games. They're phonological exercises that you can do with kids to help strengthen their phonological skills.
And
So
that was
if
going to
you
be one of my questions. Like, are there any simple exercises for that? Or how does that, I mean,
Sure,
aside from obviously tutoring, right?
sure.
Are
Yeah,
there
yeah,
any
yeah.
simple exercises that parents can do with that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of things you can do. One thing that's really good, back, when kids are 3, 4, 5 years old, or
Mm-hmm.
even later, is reading with them. I mean, all reading is good, but
Right.
reading to them isn't going to teach them to read. But
Right.
if you're reading things, you want to focus on reading things where the author is playing with the words.
Okay.
So maybe rhyming books, like nursery rhymes, those Mother Goose nursery rhymes, or
Mm-hmm.
those Dr. Seuss books with all the rhymes.
Yeah.
Those are really, really good to read with kids. And if they'll tolerate you reading it over and over and over and over and over again, that is actually really awesome
Yeah.
because you're building those phonological skills. And if you can talk to them about, so what are the words that rhyme with bat, and help them figure out that that b can be thought of as the first
Right.
sound in the word and can be separated out. Or maybe you play a game like you're driving somewhere, and you're just play games. So tell me all the words you can think of that start with a b sound,
Okay.
and then see what they come up with.
See what
You're
they say.
training them to notice that a word begins with a particular sound, and that there are different words that all have that same beginning sound. And that alone right there is just a revelation for a lot of kids.
Yeah.
Once they can do it easily with the beginning, with that first sound in the word, have them do the same thing with the last sound in the word. So give
Okay.
me all the words you can think of that end in a t, for example.
Okay.
So that would be really good. If you got refrigerator magnets, if you can have them write the word bat, help them do it. Help them take that word bat and break it apart into its individual sounds. So bat is b, at. And this is the magnet that has the letter B. And the letter B is the b sound. So we're going to put that one on the fridge
Mm-hmm.
first. Then comes the ass sound. Which letter do we need to make that ass sound? Oh, it's the A. And you put that one up. Okay, the third sound, b, at. The third sound is t. What's the letter that we use to write the t sound? And then you pull out the T and you put that on the fridge. And so now
Right.
you've got BAT on the fridge. And now you say to them, okay, so we want to take bat and let's have some fun. Let's turn bat into cat,
Yeah.
or hat, or sat, or mat, or whatever you want. And then you help them understand that, well, you know what? From going from bat to sat, we take
Mm-hmm.
away the b and we put in a s.
Okay.
And that's helping develop their phonics skills, those relationships between the sounds and the letters, but it's
Right.
also helping them develop those all-important phonological skills.
Right.
So
Which we
really,
don't
any
realize are
kind of,
so fundamental. You know,
yeah.
they're so fundamental. Like I remember growing up from back in the time where it was the hooked on phonics thing, right? Hooked on
Hmm.
phonics worked for me.
Yep, yep.
But
And that's great. I
yeah,
mean, phonics is absolutely wonderful, and it's a necessary, or it's something that must be taught to these kids who are struggling with reading. But
yeah,
if you've got poor phonological skills, so again, the phonological piece
right,
about, pulling words apart and putting them back together again, if you've got poor phonological skills, it's really hard to remember all of those phonics patterns. Like if
right.
you don't really understand, don't really realize how our reading and writing system works, and
Yeah.
your teacher is saying to you, AI, it makes A, well, if you don't understand that you can put an N in front and an L
Mm-hmm.
or ul at the end and string that together to make nail, well, then why is my teacher telling me that AI makes A? Okay, it's just another one of these random facts I have to memorize.
Right,
And that makes it very hard to stick,
right,
right? So if you understand why your teacher is explaining to you that AI is pronounced A, you're much more likely to learn it and
right.
to remember it. And so that's why the phonological skills and the phonics skills really go hand in hand.
Right.
So when a new family first comes to us, I'll do an evaluation with the child. And among other things, I'm checking their phonological skills and I'm checking their phonics skills.
Right.
Because we need to figure out what the child already knows and what they still need to learn.
Right.
And then the idea in the tutoring is that you then teach them the skills that they still need to learn.
Gotcha.
So we have a program and all, but for most kids, we're not starting, box one, square one of the program and then
Right.
marching through all the different steps. We're checking to see what the student already knows and then teaching them the skills that they still need to learn in order to
Right.
be fluent readers and good spellers.
That's amazing. And it's so needed. And I think we naturally pick this stuff up. Like I think about what you're describing. I'm like, I remember learning that stuff in school years ago. And it just got programmed that way, right, for me. But for Drayson and other kids who are neurodivergent, it's just a different way of thinking. And, this whole like, well, I put the words down, I put the letters down, it just wasn't in the right order, what's the big deal? That is 100% how Drayson is, because I'll ask him to spell something or do something, and so I'll say, oh, sweetheart, you mixed up the letters here, or and he's looking at me like, so what? I know what it means. You know what it means. Why do I have to explain to anybody else what it means? So it's very true, because that mentality is very much there. And and so it's interesting that you bring that to light, because I've never quite heard of it that way. But I'm like, oh, yeah, that happens to me all the time with Drayson.
Yeah.
So I know
Yeah.
that you talk about the science of reading. And is that kind of similar to what you're talking about, like the approach of, this approach of the phonetic awareness, is that built into the science of reading, or can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. That's absolutely part of the science of reading. So the science of reading is this really large body of research into how kids learn to read and spell.
Okay.
And yes, these phonological skills are a component of that,
One facet
but
of that,
they're
yeah.
they're one facet of the many, many, many components that go into becoming a skilled reader and
Right.
writer.
Right.
Yeah, so the science of reading is basically, if you just think of it as the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years worth of research into how kids learn to read and spell, everything that we've learned from that research, that's what we should be applying as we're teaching kids
Right.
in schools to become, or outside of schools, to become good readers and spellers.
Yeah. I
So
almost feel like I need to brush up on my reading skills now. I'm like, I think I need to read a little bit more. I know that there's a common belief that it takes years of tutoring to help dyslexic children catch up. But your program has shown progress in months. So
yeah.
what do you feel is the secret to this accelerated approach? Because you've had some extraordinary results.
We really have. I mean, I'm going to say most of the kids we work with, we're able to get them caught up in somewhere between 4 and 9 months. Not everyone,
Wow.
but most of the kids that we work with.
That's
And
amazing.
for a couple different reasons. One of them is that we do follow the science of reading, and we do, pay attention to the research and then implement, what we learn from the research. Another part of it is that we focus on the skills that the kids need to learn. So we do, check them up front, figure out what they need to learn, and then focus on that. Another part of it is that kids are with us multiple times per week.
Okay.
A lot of times tutoring out there is only once a week, and
Right.
that's not going to get you the kind of progress that you're looking for. That's what a lot of tutoring centers do. And I understand why, it's easier to fit into people's schedules. It's, less expensive. But the problem is, if you're doing tutoring once a week, you're not going to make progress at any kind of nice
Right.
clip.
Right.
So most of the kids we're actually working with them 3 times a week, 4 times a week, in the summer, even 5 times a week.
Yeah.
If you go into the research, it's the gold standard for teaching dyslexic kids to read is an hour a day of one-on-one instruction, Monday to
Wow.
Friday.
Wow.
And that's a lot.
5 hours
That's
a week then.
5
Yeah.
hours a week. That's more than most families can manage to, fit into their schedule, fit into their budget, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera.
Right.
But that's what we should be aiming for, 5 days a week for an hour. And then kids get caught up quite quickly, surprisingly quickly, actually. But even
Right.
at 3 or 4 times a week, they get caught up much more quickly, like way more quickly than if you're only doing it once a week. For some kids, twice a week, and we do work with some kids twice a week. For some kids, twice a week is enough. Like, I'll do the evaluation with them up
Mm-hmm.
front and discover, oh, well, you know what? Actually, their phonological skills are great. They're just missing this handful of phonics patterns. And then you
Right.
can just teach them that, and it's not affecting their self-confidence. It's not a big problem. It doesn't
Right.
really matter how long it takes to get them
Yeah.
caught up. And in
Yeah.
those situations, if parents want to do it twice a week, that's great. But, when parents come to me and the child is really distressed about being behind their peers in reading, when they have weak phonological skills, when they're missing a lot of phonics patterns,
Mm-hmm.
those are the situations where I'll say to the parents, if you can pull this off, it'd be really great if we could do this 3, 4, or even 5 times a week.
Thanks. Yeah.
And the more often you do it, the more quickly they're going to get caught up,
Right.
right? Like it's a certain number of skills that they need to learn. And if they're doing tutoring 4 times a week, it'll take half as long to teach them those skills compared to a situation where you're doing it twice a week.
Twice a week. Yeah. And I would think the
Yeah,
retention would be better, especially even once a week,
exactly.
because
Exactly.
a week goes by, the retention, how effective is that, holding on to that information
Exactly.
for them. And what
Yep.
about for older kids? Like, is it, if dyslexia wasn't caught early, is that something that, is it too late for middle school or high schoolers to
Oh,
become
not at
fluent
all.
readers?
Not at all, not at
Okay.
all. No, I mean, more than half of the kids we work with, so we work with kids from grades 1 through 12. I'm going to say
Okay.
more than half of them are in elementary school, so first, second, third, fourth grade, and so on. But we've
Mm-hmm.
always had a good number of high schoolers. So this
Okay.
is, I think, when kids are in high school and parents are thinking ahead to the ACT and the SAT, and they go get their children tested,
Mm-hmm.
neuropsych evaluation or psychoeducational evaluation, and
Right.
it turns out the child has dyslexia. We have a lot of testing, a lot of these psychologists who test kids who refer families to us. And
Yeah.
so we've always had, a good contingent of high schoolers. And, years ago, I used to think, oh, it's going to be so much harder to get a high school kid caught up than
Mm-hmm.
it is to get someone caught up who's diagnosed in, let's say second grade.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that's not been our experience at all. And I've had lots of conversations with lots of testing psychologists
Mm-hmm.
about, what might be going on here. And we have different theories. One is that there's another sort of opening of neuroplasticity, and that teenage years are actually a really good time
Mm-hmm.
to be teaching kids or teens those skills.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing, this is just a theory of mine, this is not backed by any research, but for those kids who never got, caught, I'm going to say, like
Mm-hmm.
nobody ever realized they were
Right.
having such a hard time with reading and spelling,
Right.
that means they've got a lot of other really strong skills that have been supporting them all these years. Like if you
Right.
couldn't read, if you couldn't figure it out, somebody would have noticed and somebody would have intervened back in
Intervened.
second grade. But
Yeah.
maybe you had a lot of background knowledge and you have a really strong vocabulary and a really good memory and you're really good at drawing inferences and this and all of those other skills are going to help you when you're now
Right.
learning those foundational reading skills that you're missing. So I
Right.
think that's part of it as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then we also have a lot of kids now in middle school actually, because
Oh,
the
that's
kids who are
great.
now in middle school are the ones who were had
Yeah.
COVID schooling for
Yeah.
kindergarten, first grade, second grade,
Yeah.
and didn't necessarily like even if the school was otherwise teaching kids phonics patterns and phonological
Yeah.
skills, maybe that didn't work so well during COVID, and so now we've got a whole contingent of kids in middle school who I think are struggling with reading because they missed those foundational years, that foundational instruction in
Right.
kindergarten, first grade, second grade.
Right. And that's Drayson. I think that's where he's kind of falling in that category, like you were saying. It's
Yeah.
like he's in eighth grade, and I can see all of a sudden there's some more struggle than usual. And that's because he's advancing academically as well. And that, which kind of leads me into, we have just a few more minutes before we wrap up the show today, but that kind of leads me into my next question about the IEP scenarios, right, at school. If a child
Mhm.
has an IEP for a specific learning disability in reading,
Yep.
Is this the same as a dyslexia diagnosis, and will the school be supported enough? Because this is something that we encountered with Drayson. They gave us specific learning disability in reading, but they wouldn't help me to diagnose him with dyslexia. And so I had to go outside independently to get that done. But will the school's support be enough with just that term, specific learning disability in reading?
So it's the same thing.
Okay.
Specific learning disability in reading is the same thing as dyslexia. Some schools don't want to use the terminology because
Okay.
I think they're worried that parents are going to freak out.
Okay.
And I've had parents, so I'm very cautious now when I'm speaking with a new family. I tend to not launch right into the discussion about dyslexia because they
Right.
may or may not think that their child has dyslexia, and they might get really
Yeah.
upset if I use that term.
Which
So
makes
I think,
sense. Yeah.
which makes sense. So I think schools tend to avoid it for that reason, to not,
Okay.
stress out the parents. But
Okay.
really, it's the same thing.
It's the same
Um,
thing.
it's the same thing. What the school, once they have the diagnosis, whether it's specific learning disability in reading or dyslexia, what the school will then do with that IEP is come up with goals. Like our goal is for your child to learn these skills over the next, 6 months, year, 2 years, and so on. And hopefully, presumably, your child will then actually meet those goals that the school sets out for them.
Okay.
The disconnect is that, yes, the child will make progress, and yes, they'll probably learn those skills, but that's not teaching them at a quick enough pace to help them actually get caught up to their peers in reading.
Right. Right.
So yes, they're making progress, but if everybody else is also making progress, maybe even making quicker progress than they're making,
Right.
there's no chance for that child to get caught up.
They can't stay. Yeah. They can't pace. Yeah. The same way.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
And it goes back to, at least in part, it goes back to the timing of all this, what we were saying before, an hour a day, 5 days a week. If schools could do that one-on-one, if your school could offer one-on-one instruction 5 days a week for your child, yes, they could
Right.
get your child caught up, but schools don't have the resources to do that.
I know. I feel like in so many aspects, not just with education, like we've gotten to the point of getting things done quickly and go, 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 that we've kind of minimized so many different things within education that I think are so needed because we're just trying to it's like the add-ons keep happening, but we're not taking anything away. Does that make sense? Like it's like, oh, we need to make sure we're incorporating this goal, but this other goal never got addressed. Like there's no slow and steady race. It's like there's just a ton of add-ons and the pace is fast. And sometimes I feel like if we just slow down a little bit with our kiddos from an educational standpoint too, they're going to retain better. They're going to learn more. They're going to be happier too,
Yeah.
But and I know that that's a frustration for a lot of our educators as well. So, Daniela, I so appreciate our conversation today. And I just, for our listeners, I want all of our listeners to know that if you are really feeling overwhelmed or, can see the challenges with reading within your child, please reach out to Daniela. I'm going to list all of her information in the show notes for reference. So anyone that's interested in reaching out to Daniela, please do. Daniela, thank you so much for being on the show today. I greatly appreciate your insight and your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. This concludes our episode for today. If you have questions, comments, or even a show topic that you would like to hear about, please feel free to send me an email at info@piecesformypuzzle.com. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you have not done so already, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. If you like what you're hearing, please spread the word to others so that we can encourage to support autism families and encourage them to find resources. And feel free to give us a good rating on your preferred podcast platform of choice. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, keep working on your puzzle, and remember, you don't have to have it all solved in a day. Take care.